Thank you guys for being patient. We are on the road. This is stop number 5 of a 7-state Battleground Tour. I'm a part of the Harris Walls team that's going into Battleground states and activating voters where they are. So you've seen the big rallies that have taken place. You guys had an amazing rally yesterday with the VP, with the former president, with a bunch of local talent here. And Beyonce, I guess, is going to take the stage pretty soon in Houston, Texas. So people are all over this country, really spreading the word about the importance of this election. And a part of what the Harris Walls team knew or knows, in order to win this election, we got to come into communities and go where people are. So we've been in bars, we've been in barber shops, we've been in cafes, we've been where people are, particularly African American voters. So that's why we are at this pub tonight. So if it's a little noisy, it's okay, because we're at a club. And why are we at a club? Because this is where our people are. So when people say the Democrats take your vote for granted, say Areva came from California, called all her friends to come out because you all matter. And every vote matters, and our people matter so much in this election. So just thank you for being here. I am so grateful to be in the company of some amazing people. This is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and anchor. She's going to be my guest co-host for tonight. Her name is Sharon Reed. You guys have seen her on TV here. You've seen her on the Black Network. In the Black Network. She was on air in my hometown of St. Louis, Missouri. So I'm super excited. She and I do a lot of work together on television. So glad to have Sharon here. We have Daniel Rosebud. We have Jason Barnes, we have Latasha Brown, we have Roger Bruce, and we have Quadrilyn Jackson. And these are all folks who are working on the ground, ensuring that Georgia, as you all know, Georgia is one of those important battleground states. We are 11 days away from the election, and it is crunch time, folks. This is the moment to make our voices heard, shape the future we want to see. And tonight we've got a powerful conversation lined up focusing on the issues that are driving Georgia voters to the poll. So this is a live taping. This then will get distributed across just a multitude of platforms so that folks that are not here will have an opportunity to hear from these esteemed experts. So I'm going to start it by asking you, Latasha. You are the executive director, the president, the leader, the champion for Black Voters Matter. And right now, there's a lot of articles out about Black voters in Georgia being apathetic, Black voters in Georgia being concerned about the high cost of groceries, clothing, gas. And 4 years ago, these Black voters are saying these prices weren't this high. And so a lot of people see very few differences in Trump and Kamala Harris, and many voters, including Black voters that participated in this article for Politico, said they believe the economy and their own personal finances will be better under Donald Trump. And a part of what we're going to do tonight is debunk false narratives. So tell us what you're hearing around this issue, that things are high and they'll be better under Trump.
So one, thank you. Thank you for this discussion, because I do think it's timely. One, I am the co-founder of Black Voters Matter. My other co-founder and partner is executive director. I'm chief doer. That is my official title. But what we're hearing from the ground, literally we're doing work all around the country, but what we hear from the ground in Georgia is that when we're thinking about the number one issue, the economy is the number one issue. But the way that we think about it is very differently. We're thinking about, when we're talking about the economy, Black folk are not listening to or commenting around the unemployment rate. You can't really say, well, the unemployment rate was lower or the GDP. They're looking at costs. We think of it differently. At the end of the day, will I have more money in my pocket? At the end of the day, can I do what I need to do? And so ultimately, as we've been talking to people, I do think that we know that there's a target, there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation in our communities. And so part of what we do with our work on the ground is really be able to connect with folks to figure out exactly what's important to them and what it is that they care about. And so when we look at the differences, part of what we do, literally just even having a voter guide to say, this is this person's policy, this is this person's policy. when you're looking at, let's think about black folks, and when we're thinking about wealth, what we know in this nation is that ultimately one of the first pieces of foundations of building wealth has been home ownership, right? And so ultimately what we are hearing is, and I can tell you just in general, just in this market alone, it took me months to find a home. I actually put three contracts on houses. We put 3 contracts on houses, and each and every time I was bought out. Matter of fact, 2 of the times there were people who came in with all cash deals. It just knocked me out the game, right? And I was happy at myself that we were able to get these homes. And then ultimately, when you're looking at terms of housing stock, that there's not the lack of availability of housing stock, come to find out that there are areas, swaths of areas, and one of the places I was looking at that a corporation had bought a whole bunch of homes. They're buying these homes, making them rental properties. And so I'm raising this because that's a structural issue that is literally a barrier around home ownership. What we're hearing Vice President Harris say is that ultimately one of the first pieces of her, which you're thinking about this opportunity agenda, is that ultimately she's going to create a mechanism for literally for people to make it easier to have homes, for home ownership, that you get $25,000, right, down payment assistance. That would have been a game changer for me, particularly in my first home. It took me years just to save for my first home to get the down payment, because where I was, there wasn't a down payment assistance. And then when you think about that, if that is fundamentally the foundation of wealth, of around literally being able, a starter of wealth of getting access to homes, also in terms of the quality of homes. And we know that if corporations are buying up thousands of homes in Georgia, what ultimately that means in terms of exploitation. I have a family member currently right now who is in an apartment that the floors are covered with mold. And because she can't find anywhere else to stay right now, it's not that easy, and just economically is a strain on her, because she wanted to find a house, that she's in this circumstance that actually there's health risk to that. You know, I think ultimately when you're talking about what is it when we're talking about the economy, and we're talking about economically what has been done, I do want people to understand, because there's one myth that I want to debunk. I want to get this real clear around this whole idea that Trump gave you a check. Trump did not give you a check. Let's clear that up, right? Not only did he not give you a check, it was the Democrats that really passed the legislation, but not only did he not give you a check, he delayed you getting the check, because he actually delayed it so he can put his signature on this check. And so I think it's really important for us to really have the truth and be able to share the truth around what it is that we need. And when our communities are talking about all what we want is what everybody else wants. It ain't no secret about what black folks want. We want what everybody. The white folks want good houses. We want good houses, right? The white folks want to get paid for doing good work. We want the same thing. So it's not a rocket science. I do believe that that's part of what we're seeing, particularly as we're talking about some of the things I think that literally are points of wealth for black folks. That when you're talking about home ownership, when you're talking about literally around wages, when you're talking about the cost of things, when you're talking about price gouging, and we've also seen that. We saw that in COVID, that you're going to have some kind of accountability of those who are taking advantage of these moments for folks. So I think that those are some of the things that we're running and we're talking to people about.
The issue I have, and you're right, and it's helpful to give voters just a rundown. Where do they stand on the economy, immigration, whatever it is? You go across the country, Areva, you've been across the country, we've all, right, sampled the electorate. Yeah. What do you say when there's so much saturation? When you have people of color, all people saying things that just aren't true. You're going to pay $4,000 on the low end, right? People who are middle class, you're going to pay $4,000 more a year under Trump's plan, okay? That's just a fact. So how do you overcome it when we all run into these people who say no? Right is left, left is right, up is down. How do you convince them?
I think it's more because, I think also love what Natasha said, and also thank you, Areva. I think the economy is about a feeling, right? People feel that in their pocket. But when we give it, when we're beating people over the head with facts, and Latasha knows this when we worked in Alabama, when we say meet people where they're at, it's not about providing this information and walking around with them. It's like, how do I make it real? All right, if I'm going to the grocery store, right, and I can't afford a loaf of bread, Really simple, right? Now, why can I afford that loaf of bread at Kroger? Well, Kroger is now currently putting in cameras to see how many times a person comes in front of a loaf of bread. And if they come in front of a loaf of bread, guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna up the price. So this is price gouging, right? And before Republicans say, well, what's she talking about price gouging for? There are so many states. I am from Alabama, born in Mississippi. I lived in hurricane country my whole entire life. Every time a hurricane came through, right? And for folks who know what that feels like my birthday was the day before Katrina, all right? To just really make that plain. Water went up, gas went up, eggs went up, bread went up. Essential items that black folks need in their houses to take care of their kids went up. And what did the state of Alabama do? You can't do that. So when a Republican state says, oh, you can't price gouge, but now when a Democratic presidential candidate says it, we can't do it all of a sudden? It's like, no, we have to also let our people know who is actually pulling the strings, because a lot of times we're dealing with folks that are ignorant to the actual structural issues and the levers that are pulled against them, right? And so when we stop talking about, oh, it's a Democrat or it's a Republican, we start saying like, yo, these billionaire corporations are also doing some really heinous stuff just to make an extra dollar. We saw it in the pandemic, how corporations made more money than they've ever made before. Right? And that was off the strength of our backs. That's off the strength of essential workers. And the essential workers are black folks, right? Folks that keep the lights on, right? And they're taking advantage of us. And now we say, oh, well, things were better under Trump. Let's also just keep it real. The tax plan that we're still on is Trump's tax plan that ends in 2025. And that's why your income tax don't look like it used to. You know what I'm saying? You know, prior to that. Like, so let's also keep it funky. So if you still work, like if people, I see it all the time, right? Well, he gave me $1,200. You still talking about $1.02 when we actually stretched that out since the last time you got that? Like, do you still have that $1,200 check? Because I don't. And last time I checked, it was supposed to be $2,000, but he cut it by $800, right? And so I think what we have to do is, you have to meet, like it's like you meet the brother on the stoop, you meet the brother on the block. You meet the sister in the hair store. It's not just about meeting people where they're at. It's also taking that really, really confusing political jargon, because I get that politics is boring. Nobody wants to watch CNN. Nobody wants to get on whitehouse.org and see what the presidential briefing is every day. But how do I make it real? How do I translate that and tell you like, yo, you should have a problem with Kroger saying that, hey, we want to implement cameras under every single piece of grocery and food inside this store and up the price when we see, oh, well, they're buying this, let's up the price of it. No, that's not how groceries work. Last time I checked. You know what I'm saying? So I think when you make it plain for people, you also show people who is pulling the strings and what the problem is, and you take away the politician, because Kamala ain't got nothing to do with that. Trump ain't got nothing to do with that. Maybe Trump has something to do with it because he made it easier for them to do it. Right? But it's about how do we get back to the source of actually talking about these people are taking advantage of us, and we at the end of the day have the power to actually say, hold up, player, no.
That's such a good point about being taken advantage of. And when you think about what Trump has been doing around the country, all the disparaging remarks that he makes about black communities like Detroit, like Chicago, predominantly black cities, how come, Rosebud, that's not making black folks mad? When did we start letting people come into our communities, talk crap about us, and then reward them with our vote?
I'm not sure how we get to a point where that's okay, but I think for a long time, black people, we were the working class. We still are the working class, as you mentioned. And we were taught to get a good job, to join the union, because government really wasn't for us. We weren't getting what we needed out of government, so we turned to our employers, right? We saw that in the Industrial Revolution, where people like Ford and other organizations are the ones that supplied welfare. They are the ones that supplied a level of stability. And so as we grew up, as I'm from the 90s, I was told to get a good job if I could go to school, but if I couldn't, find a factory job, join the union, and gain some stability. I think what we're hearing, a lot of what comes out of the other side of Trump's neck is that he's going to create jobs here, and that something is taking jobs away. And the people who are not necessarily super college educated or are worried that some of their basic access to to funding or money will disappear, they're latching onto this idea that Trump is going to in some way create jobs. So that in itself is good enough for them to align to. But I do think that on the other side of that, his actual policy will take more jobs away. I think what happens too is that when you talk about meeting people where they are and educating them on what they need, is that we don't understand that a lot of the times what we experience in an administration is a residual, at least 2 years of that is a residual from the past administration. So a lot of the good stuff that we saw during the Trump administration was residual of the Obama administration.
Talk about it.
And you won't feel what Trump has done until right now. And when we talk about meeting people where they are, it's not just about talking the language, but it's also about going into the venues where they are, right? We don't always use social media the way it's supposed to be used. We don't always use in-person mediums the way they're supposed to be used, or even written genres is the way that it's supposed to be used. Meeting people where they are trusting the information the most is most important right now, and taking people and giving them a logistic, right? Helping them understand, hey, 2 years of a person's administration, they're most likely fighting executive orders and legislation from the past. 2 years or 3 to 4 years of administration, you're really feeling the benefit of a past administration. Who are you really aligning to? It's really the past administration if you're agreeing with what you're feeling in the current.
Part of meeting people where they are is you come with respect. And where you mentioned our families taught get a job, the union, do right, set yourself up. Part of that respect, though, is you protect your mother and your sister. And so I still am having difficulty here, and maybe you can speak to it, as to why this candidate over here, I mean, it's basic respect, is allowed to say all kinds of things about this woman of color, and yet we're hearing, and perhaps it's overblown, that some of the finest of us, Black men, if it's not overblown.
Let me say this, because I do want to respond to this. One, if there's a phrase that I can say to capture that is don't believe the hype. That part of what is happening, that there is this narrative that in some ways that Black men woke up this year and all of a sudden got disillusioned with the political process. The truth of the matter is we've been pissed off about this political process for a minute. Like ultimately, and I think that there is a lack, because race and gender is in your face right now, you've got to deal with race and gender, right? That now all of a sudden, because I say this all the time, sometimes the way we do it is when white folks discover a problem, that's when then all of a sudden that's when it cropped up. The truth of the matter is Black men have been frustrated, as they should be, for years, just as we have been, because they have not been treated properly. We have not gotten our share in equity of the business or around economic opportunity. We have seen the mass incarceration. So should Black men be pissed off? Hell yeah, they should be pissed off.
Does the party need to acknowledge that?
Yes, but listen, but it's being exploited. No, but we're not. But what is happening is that our pain is being exploited, as it often is. That is not only is it being exploited, it's being mislabeled. And now all of a sudden, instead of it being a greater analysis around our frustration with this system, it's being attached to this woman at the top of the ticket. That in some way, that this frustration, because that's the easy way out. That's a sensational headline. In addition to that, of all of these men, I do work in 15 states. For all of these men that are supposed to be not supporting and going to Trump, where are they? We heard the same thing in Georgia. In Georgia, we heard, those in Georgia know that it was supposed to be this mad flux of people going to Herschel Walker. I don't know what happened to them. For some reason, I don't know what happened to them. Right, we ain't seen them. We don't know what happened to them. And I'm saying that for a reason, because we also have to recognize that there is an active, intentional effort to put disinformation and misinformation in our communities. There are polls that are popping up on my timeline that I don't know who those posters are. And so part of it is there is information that is being seeded in our communities to actually so it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And people that don't read and people who are literally taking the easy way out will get a hold to that narrative and start perpetuating that same narrative.
But I do think, let me just say this, Natasha, I agree with you. I think the numbers are being inflated. And every year, historically, we can look back and the Black vote for Republican candidates is always between 8, maybe 10%. There's never this just tsunami
Right.
of black voters voting for Republicans. But I can tell you, having been now to 5 states, knocking doors, I go and I canvass, there are, and it's a small sample size, so it's not like a statistical, analysis that I'm going to articulate, but there are people out here, black men, that have bought into the sound bites that they hear on Fox News, have bought into some of this disinformation that's been targeted towards them, and there is an anger, and there is a frustration, and there's misogyny, and there are black men who have told me to my face, a woman should not be a leader, she's not strong enough, she should not be the president, and they have bought into this toxic masculinity that being a man means the loudest voice, being the rudest person in the room, using profanity, using insults, that somehow, embodies what a man is. I want to ask Roger, because he probably is the senior statesman of this group, and I'm making an assumption by your hair, you could be younger than all of us, but looks like you've been around. Okay, looks like you've been around a lot. So what do you think is happening? Two things to be true at the same time. Natasha can be right about this narrative being spun that's bigger, and I can be right that I am meeting these people on the street who do have some sense that it's not time. I don't know when it would be time, but somehow a woman is not ready to lead.
My first reaction to that is that every one of us has a mother. And my mother happens to be a black mother. I have a sister who happens to be a black sister. I have a wife. I have a daughter, all of them black. And I think the world of them, and I think that they're capable of doing anything that's put before them. And those things that are not before them, they have the ability to go out and learn and do all of the things that need to be done to be successful. And I taught my children, somebody mentioned it before. When I grew up, and I'm 71, I'll just tell you how old I am. And but when I grew up, I was told, go to school, get a good job, get a good education, so that I could go beg somebody for a job. They didn't say it that way, but that's what it amounted to. You go beg somebody for a job. Then you give them your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, maybe even your 50s, and then they say, well, we don't need you anymore. Thank you for what you've done, but we don't need you anymore. I didn't teach my children that. My children were taught, go to school, get a good education so you could do whatever you want. And that's the difference. And I just believe that a woman has the ability to do anything that she sets her mind to do. And I love my mother, I love my sister, I love the women around me. There happens to be a young lady here with us tonight. I've known her since I was a baby, just about. We grew up together in New York, and she's capable of doing whatever she wants to do. So to answer your question point blank, I don't understand why somebody says it's not time. It is absolutely the time, and we need to all get out and take somebody with you to the poll and vote this woman in.
Can I hop in? Because I wanted to, because I talk data, right? I don't just talk like as a voting rights expert, I talk data. Let's actually talk about the black men that say they're not voting for Kamala Harris. Let's talk about what that demographic is, right? So we know that the African American population is between about 11 to 13% in this country out of 300 million plus people. Now let's take just that 13%. We're talking specifically about 18 to 35-year-old non-college educated black men, typically more times often than not, that are saying these things in polling. Does anybody know what that percentage is in here? It's less than 2%. And I say less than, not subtract 2% from that 13%, less than 2% within that 13%. All right, so let's get very specific. Also, when we talk about black men not supporting black women, last time I checked, when abortion was on the ballot in Ohio and we got them exit return polls back, it was black men being the highest minority group that voted to protect and enshrine abortion rights for people in the state of Ohio. And that's a Republican state run by a Republican governor. Let's keep that in mind. So let's stop. We have to, as Latasha said, we have to, one, not believe the hype, But also at the same time, I'm a black male voter. I don't know too many black male voters around myself that are saying these things. But when I do hear them, I engage with those black men just like I engage with anybody else, with love, compassion, and show them humanity. One, not beating them over the head because I feel like they're stupid, right? It's about me. It's like showing them humanity and seeing the same black man that I see in myself, right? I'll give a quick one. I work specifically in the state of Alabama, restoring the voting rights of people with felony convictions. After a bill passed in about 2018, right before I moved up to Montgomery, it gave people who have been serving time a pathway finally to be able to get voting rights. For 6 generations in the state of Alabama since 1901, if you went to prison, you never got to vote again. Now, everybody in here could, if I said raise your hand right now if you know somebody who's formerly incarcerated, I bet every hand would shoot up. You know what I'm saying? And I bet one of those people might be your family member. One of those people might be an immediate family member, right? And you know what happened when I talked to those people about, hey, I could restore your vote, or they didn't know that the felony conviction they had wasn't disqualifying and they could be restoring their vote the entire time? They were elated because you know what the data shows us? That people with felony convictions want to participate in civic engagement. They want to be able to say, yo, I don't want that city councilman on that, like in that position because they're not actually seeing me. I've been complaining about the same I love using the pothole example. If me and Rosebud are on different sides of the political spectrum, right? And we're next door neighbors. I'm on the left, he's on the right, but there's a pothole right outside on our street, right? Regardless of what our political ideologies is, that pothole is still going to mess up both of our cars, right? So there is a solution across the board that still helps us because what? We both need that pothole to be fixed. And if that city councilman that's in that seat doesn't fix that pothole, he doesn't call city management to pave that, guess what me and Rosebud should do? We should get rid of him, right? We should be voting for somebody else that actually represents us. So to the conversation about black men in particular, one, we have to be honest about actually in the data how small that number is. And then for that number, we keep talking about meeting people where they're at, but it's about being real with them. And also giving, not just giving them the facts, but saying like, hey, you feel slighted because this democratic process has left you out. You don't know what actual opportunities that have been laid out to you by an administration that you can take advantage of. Let me actually show you how you can take advantage of some things, some programs that are actually available to you. Offering resources to people, direct services, is how you get people to change their mind. Because majority of the people that I restored voting rights to, guess what they told me? Well, hey, I got a friend that's at my halfway house that also, can you check to see what felony conviction he has? And we can restore his rights, right? It's about actually offering somebody something than just saying, I want you to vote against something. It's about offering something so they know what they can vote for and advocate for themselves. That's what we need to do.
So are we leaning in too much on the candidate? I think she's a fabulous candidate. And should we be leaning in the information, the issues, where those can help people specifically in their everyday lives?
So I do represent a 501c3, so I'm not able to talk about candidates or parties, but I am happy to talk about issues. And I was grateful that the issue of abortion was brought into the conversation. I represent an organization that's been providing abortion care in Georgia since 1976. And even though Georgia is currently under a 6-week ban, we continue to provide that life-saving care to people not only who live in Georgia, but people who live in Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Kentucky, Texas, Oklahoma, and many other states where abortion has been completely banned due to the overturning of Roe during the Dobbs decision. So I know that reproductive health rights and justice are incredibly important to many people, not just Black women, but people across gender who care about the freedom of bodily autonomy.
So one of the things that keeps coming up is the 500,000, 800,000 voters that Stacey Abrams in the state of Georgia was able to register, and how significant that was in terms of the two Democratic senators that were elected in this state, yes. So Latasha, are those voters on the voting rolls today? When I was out knocking doors in DeKalb County, Decatur, I think I was in the city, pretty much every door we knocked on, I'd say, "Hi, Mr. Johnson," and they would look at me with a blank face because it wasn't Mr. Johnson. And the voting rolls were horribly wrong. So has something happened since the time that those voters were registered and those senators were elected? Because that's going to be important, finding your voters, knowing where they are, knocking on their doors, getting them to the polls. What has changed?
You know, I think legally, I actually want Roger Bruce to, because we've had legislators who have been fighting to make sure that we have legislation in place to protect us. But I want to step back for a second. It's really important for us to recognize that black folk are coming out, and it is really amazing. Let me say this. It's amazing black folks voting at the level we're voting at. We are actually voting, because I want people to really understand this, because oftentimes we're constantly almost beating each other down, right? Or constantly chastising each other. The truth of the matter, for black folks to be voting on par with white folks when they done got all the political, economic, social benefits, that's a hell of a job, y'all. I'm saying that because I think we've got to also recognize that, yes, we have to do more, but the fact that, because we're not really just voting, it's not like black folks don't understand and have a critique of this system. What we do is we do understand leverage power. There's no other voting block in this country. Is really interesting that there's a whole analysis about black men and we ain't talking about white women. Because the truth of the matter is that black men have actually only second to black women in terms of voting Democrat. And so if you all don't recognize that there's something fishy about that there's something, there are ideas that are actually planted as seeds. And I push back on that. It's Areva, just as you've heard folks say, as you're talking to, I don't disagree with that. I've heard that too, but I can tell you, I've done this work 30 years, that I know the difference between a conversation and a commitment. Right. Like, and I'm saying that because I can talk to somebody for 5 minutes. I know what network you listen to, and I can almost tell you if you got that from TikTok. Just the way I'm serious. Or Instagram. If you literally go a step deeper, when we're talking to brothers and they'll say that, right, what we do is we listen. We listen. If you just peel it back a little bit deeper, because sometimes I'm frustrated and I can't put the reason why I'm frustrated, because I might not, it just may be overwhelming why I'm frustrated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gravitate to what I've heard or what I've seen in social media or what I've seen in mainstream media. The media has always exploited our pain. And so I'm raising this, and I'm going to keep saying this, because ultimately we will create and grab hold to a narrative that other people have planted in our communities that the evidence don't support that. And so ultimately we've got to really speak to that and organize. As I'm saying, when we're talking about these voters, part of the reason why we've seen the level of voter suppression, and we've seen Senate Bill 202 come out of here, is because we're showing up. That we're literally breaking records. That part of what we're seeing, yes. Are we seeing voter suppression? Absolutely. That's why some of us, we will sue the state in a heartbeat. I think we're suing them now. We will sue, right, if I'm not, we're suing about 4 states, all right. I think we're suing Texas, Florida, and Georgia right now. Right, we'll roll up on you now. But I'm saying that because I think it's really important for us to recognize.
Let me just stop you and ask you this.
Okay.
You raised a good point about white women. White women broke for Trump in 2016. White women broke for Trump in 2020. What does your data across these 15 states tell you about what white women are likely to do in this election?
My organization is Black Voters Matter. I'm organizing on trying to get black folks out. So this is the wrong organization. I mean, somebody else is probably more equipped to tell us that. So Jason, you tell us, because I follow to a certain extent, but my goal is to maximize what we do. But anyway.
Break it down.
I agree with Latasha first and foremost, because this is black people business first and foremost. but let's talk about white women voters.
Black people's business, but we win this election through coalition voting.
coalition,
We
right.
can't win just with us. So I want to know what are we
Right.
because what Tasha said is there may need to be a greater critique of white women. So that's what we want to know.
One, let's talk about this election in particular, especially with what our data says, right? When we're talking to white women voters, when we're talking to independent voters, also when we're talking to just non-black voters in general, one of the biggest things that we're seeing is abortion outpaces the economy, like in a way that you have never seen, right? Because first of all, I think you'll agree with me when I say this. Abortion is an economic issue. Why is it an economic issue? Because it gives women the agency to what? Start a family or not start a family. That is a financial decision, not a moral decision. That is a financial decision because that changed your entire life because now what are you doing? You are now raising a family, right? So what we're seeing with white women right now is, you can't tell me what to do with my body. Last time I checked, and you're hearing that on the left, on the right, and in the middle. And I know that you can speak to all of the states that you mentioned, from all the way from Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Missouri, we can go down the line. All of these, you have white women, black women, Hispanic women, Asian women, everybody is rushing to go get what? Healthcare, because healthcare, one, is a fundamental right and should be as an American, full stop, all right? Full stop. But what we have to understand is, I said this a long time ago. There's a person in the crowd. We had a nice conversation about it back in 2021. And I said, you can't tell white women what to do with their bodies. Because last time I checked, you can't, they will go see a manager. They will go see an assistant manager. And hell, they'll go see the goddamn president. Let me stop cussing. But they will do what is necessary to also protect themselves. And we're seeing that in conversations with Republicans that live in the suburbs of Atlanta. They're saying, yo, I'm worried about what if my daughter is assaulted, right? And she has to now carry her rapist baby. What if God forbid, what if my husband is molesting my children, right? And now because this has happened. This is actual news, right? A young black girl in my home state of Mississippi was raped by one of her family members and had to carry her child. We've seen people die on hospital beds because they cannot get care. It's not just about the child being born, right? It's about women not having the actual agency to choose their actual life on the line. And so that's what has changed fundamentally about this conversation with white women and just non-black voting women in general. Because listen, Asian votes up by 26 points, right? Hispanics votes up by 13. You know who's in third? Black folk, right? You know why? Because we are understanding and meeting the moment, and we're understanding, like, one, we're not just voting for we're not voting for a world to exist in right now. We're voting for a world for our children to exist in 25 years later, so that they have economic opportunity, so that they have access to health care, so that they have access to housing, so that they have access to a clean economy, right? A clean economy, because one, y'all, listen, when we talk about clean energy and we talk about pollution and we talk about when we talk about that Green New Deal, where are all those chemical plants typically in the South? Where are they located, right? They're located next to black neighborhoods, right? Let's use Louisiana as an example. All those chemical plants that have been poisoning those people, giving them people cancer, right? If we go up to the catfish farms in the middle of mid-Alabama, way out there past Selma, there's catfish farm, Uniontown, poisoning people's water. And you know what nobody's doing? A damn thing about it, right? So black folks don't got clean water because we don't have an actual clean energy policy in place. And we have one candidate that's actually pushing that, and another one that's saying, oh, I don't care. Who did he put as his Secretary of Energy? A person that sat on an executive board for a gas company, okay? Like, we have to understand the game that these people are trying to play, because they playing in our faces. And last time I checked, you don't play with black women. You don't play with women in general, but you definitely don't play with black women and play in their face. And I think that's where we're sitting right now, especially when we're talking about, like, how these white women feel, because I'm talking to them when I'm polling them. Like, and I'm asking them questions, and the one thing they're saying is, I may want to, like, one may live in Florida and say, you know, hey, I may vote for Trump, but I can't send Rick Scott back to the Senate knowing that he's going to vote against abortion rights. Maybe I am going to vote for that Democratic candidate. And we know how Florida works, all right? We could talk about Colin Allred in Texas being only 1 point or in a virtual tie with Ted Cruz. And why? Because abortion is on the ballot. Because white women sued the state of Texas when they almost lost their lives because they couldn't get access to health care and an abortion. Not black women, right? White women went to the state house and said, you can't do that, and since you're not going to do that, I'll sue you. We'll take this to the Supreme Court if we got to.
So let somebody else talk for a second, okay?
No, I'm very passionate about it, and it's true. I want to know about the ground game because
before you do that,
sure.
This abortion thing. There's again, you pointed out. I'm the elder in the room. This abortion thing is about white folks wanting to increase their numbers. Bingo. Okay. Back in the 20s, when Hitler was in office, who this guy praises, if you had a baby that did not have blonde hair, blue eyes, they killed those babies. They did that here too. And their numbers shrunk as a result of doing that. So abortion, it's a right. Women want to be able to control their bodies, but the white men are telling their white women, we have to increase our numbers. Yeah. Okay.
I was going to say too, when we talk about the position of white women or how they vote, a lot of their ideals come either from their father or the guy that they're marrying, and they're trying to protect the financial position of those individuals. And then we talk about black men dating outside of our race. When you think about the black men that are not in support of Kamala, most likely they're in a relationship with someone who is giving them this rhetoric. So it's not that we don't support black women or that we don't, but there is a group of people who are being misinformed and miseducated on the basis of a financial position that essentially wasn't theirs in the first place, right? But I was going to say some other things, but I don't want to.
No, it's okay. I do want to talk about the ground game, though, because here in Georgia, there is, it's not panic, but we know that it's blue now, but is it really? We're still teetering on the purple. And so when you talk about the ground game here and reaching people and meeting people where they are and just giving them the facts, so that they're not voting against their own interests, is enough being done?
Well, one of the things that we focus on in our civic engagement is not just making sure that people are voting at the top of the ticket, but people understand the positions all the way down the ballot. Because even though we see black voters turn out, we often see black voters roll off. And so we absolutely have to have people understand who is running for the state legislature, who is running for the county commission, all of the ballot measures that are going to show up on the ballot. So encouraging people to download their sample ballot early so that they can have the information. If they don't have a voter guide, they can have a conversation and they can understand people's voting record and understand how the things that often happen at the federal level move very slowly. But at the state legislature, they move incredibly quickly. And those people we have so much more access to after the election cycle. When we get to legislative session, I don't know if you want to answer this, Representative Bruce, but their voicemails are not full. You can call them. Yeah. They might actually shop at the same grocery store you do. Their children might go to the same school that you do. They might go to your church because these are your local representatives and they are going to be making decisions about what happens in Georgia to Georgians.
We are almost out of time, so one thing I want to do with all of you, we have 11 days left, and there are voters in every state that have not been activated. So we all have a responsibility to find those voters. Michelle Obama told us at the DNC to do something. Do something. And she also said, don't wait to get a tap on the shoulder to do that something. But we know there are a lot of people who are waiting, and a lot of people aren't necessarily deciding to vote for Donald Trump. They're deciding between voting and the couch. So they may not be voting at all because maybe they are frustrated. Maybe they feel like their personal situation hasn't improved. We also hear people make false equivalencies. They're all bad. Nothing changes, doesn't matter. So we know that there are people who are apathetic. And if we could win this election with what I'll call average turnout, that would be one thing. We're not going to win with average turnout. We need high turnout. We need to win and win big, because Donald Trump is going to cheat, he's going to lie, he's going to do everything he can to steal the election. He's going to use the court system, he's going to use his power in any way that he can. So the bigger our win is, the more we protect ourselves from all the chicanery and all the dirty tricks we know he's going to play. So in these last couple of minutes, I want each of you esteemed Georgia leaders, legislators, to talk about what are you going to do to reach not the folks that are here, because I assume everybody here has already voted, has a plan to vote, and has already contacted family members and friends. But we need you all, the faithful few, to go out and reach those voters who have decided, maybe I'm not going to vote. We got to convert those voters. We need Obama 08 kind of turnout. And we can do it. We got 11 days, but I'll start with you, Representative Bruce. What is the advice you would give to this audience in terms of what they can do to activate those, I'm gonna call them irregular voters. Some people say low information, low propensity. I don't like those words. They seem a little negative. And Latasha has told us, let's be more positive about our black voters, and I'm all for the positivity. And we know our vice president is all about black joy. That's right. So irregular, there's no judgment in that. Just means you may do it one day and you may not do it the next day. Right. So how do we reach in Georgia those irregular voters?
Okay, first of all, let's make sure that we understand. We have 2 senators in Georgia. Both of them are Democrats. And one is a Jew and the other one is black. So we have the ability to do whatever needs to be done to get Georgia to vote for her. We just have to make sure that we get up out of the bed, and go and do things like this. I'm on a panel like this probably at least 4 times a week. And we're traveling around the state. We have buses that are taking people to the polls. And we have to be candid with each other. We have to be comfortable telling somebody, if you don't go vote, you only got 2 choices. Well, you got 3. You got a Democrat, you got a Republican, and then you have nobody if you don't go. Unfortunately, in this state, we are in a situation where people are saying, I'm not going to vote because I don't trust either party. But one of those parties is going to end up being responsible and being in charge. So you have to take the influence that you have and go out and vote, and don't go by yourself. Take somebody with you. And have somebody, whoever you're taking with you, tell them to bring somebody with them. And that's the only way we're going to win this thing. We've got to make sure that we are putting ourselves in a position where we are going to be able to take charge. Because if we don't take charge, it's just going to be more of the same.
All right, great advice.
So, again, I'm not going to talk about who should win or shouldn't win, but what I will talk about is the organizing principle that I use is about relationships and connection. And so for people who feel disenfranchised and disenchanted with the process, I don't want to use shame or any of those things to make them feel like they are less than. But what I want to do is invite them into places where they can make change. So helping people to find a political home where they can organize around the issues that are important to them, the things that they feel like maybe the political systems have ignored, the places where they can deepen their analysis of how they can build solidarity across movements, and then get them plugged in, because November 5th is just one day. We got a lot of other time where decisions are being made on our behalf, and we absolutely have an opportunity to weigh in on how those decisions get made. And so I want to invite people, if November 5th is not your day, how about November 6th? Come and talk to us about what we want to do in January, in February, in March, in July, in next November. We have multiple cycles. It's not just about Election Day. It's about the life that we want to live and the world that we want to build.
So my birthday is on November 10th, and I promise you, I do not want to be fighting these folks. So I'm gonna need y'all to get up out here and have this big margin. So on November 10th, I can be somewhere having a cocktail, okay? Because I'm an organizer, I'm going to use this opportunity to organize. Part of what we're doing, focus on this 11 days, we in these streets. Right now, as we speak, just today, we put additional 300 people on the streets in Georgia. We're in rural Georgia. We're working with over 100 organizations throughout the state. If you want to work with us and volunteer, we're working in 15 states around the country. We actually put $15 million, like literally on the ground this election cycle. We going for broke. But ultimately in my pack hat, because I can wear it because we've got a C3, C4, but I'm in my super pack hat. Part of what is really important, I think, we need people to realize, I know you all have voted, but in the scriptures, God said, be fruitful and multiply. I'm gonna need y'all to multiply these votes. And this is how you can do that, right? We're gonna say it takes 10 to win. 10 to win. 10 to win. I need you to make a list with 10 people, right, that you are responsible of making sure that you're talking to them about getting out and vote, even voting early or either on election day. Secondly, I need you to ask, you all will be amazed at how many people around you that you just simply have not asked. We kind of take it for granted. We've been seeing the commercials and what have you. Make sure that you are asking people. Third is come be down. If you want to volunteer, you can text to 25225. Text We Matter to 25225. We have text campaign every Tuesday for the next Tuesdays to get actually people out so you can go volunteer with the campaign, go to the Kamala Harris campaign and volunteer, go to another political home, just as my sister said. You all got to do some work. What we've got to do is multiply and amplify, because on November 10th, I'm trying to have a cocktail.
And we want you to have that cocktail.
I would say I'd echo all the sentiments, but also don't depend on the courts. The courts, we've got this thing with the election board here in Georgia who's just trying it every way they can, and they're getting slapped down. They keep getting slapped down. But what do we know from the last presidential election and other interference in between? They will stop at nothing. So be responsible for yourself and others. 10, how did you say? 10 to win. Ask everyone. I'm on my niece in North Carolina down there. I've had to look up the rules. You can still register and get it. Early voting starts. Right. So check on your family, friends, and don't be shy.
Yes, thank you for all of those pieces of advice. We talk about how young voters are really at the forefront of helping us win the election. In any case, I would say really focus on those individuals who just turned 18 up until 21, and then focus on your older individuals that may be still living in your household. I know a lot of people here in Georgia, we're caretakers, we're from the South, we don't let our families go, right? And so a lot of the times our grandmas become our roommates, or we're still living with our moms, right? She's not leaving, and she's gonna cook for us too while she's there, but she's not leaving. Let's make sure that she has a way to the poll. Let's make sure also our younger cousins have a way to the poll. Everyone in that 21 to 34, maybe even late 30s, early 40s, they're most likely going to get out and vote, whether they're trying to get some free time away from work or whatever. They're going to find a reason to vote. Let's focus on that crowd of people who just hit voter age, and let's focus on those people who may not be able to get out the house like they used to, okay? And then two, for college students, I'm at Georgia State right now, studying psychology, and a lot of students there aren't from the state. So I'm encouraging them to do early voting to help them understand absentee ballots and ensure that maybe, like you said, sometimes you're still able to register in the state a day of or a couple of days before. Making sure that we're encouraging people to look specifically into their state's rules, and hopefully if they're in a state where they don't live, that they're willing to do an absentee ballot. And then when everything else fails, let's educate people on really what they're fighting for, which is access, more access, right? More access to equality, more support from federal and local agencies. And don't forget your provisional ballots as well if anything else goes wrong.
So, I'm gonna put on my organizer hat too, because I've worked with Latasha back in Alabama in the 2020 election, and it's about building political power. And so my call to action to you, like I would in any meeting, was that I want you to be a neighbor. And what I mean by I want you to be a neighbor, we have isolated and siloed ourselves so much since this pandemic, and we were really doing it beforehand, right? To the point where if we even live in apartment complexes, we're not even talking to the people who live next to us. We're not asking them, hey, do you need some sugar? Like, I like to use this example because I live next door to some actual conservative voters, right? I live in a suburb in East Point, like right there by downtown. My next door neighbors are Catholic. They got 3 kids. They working on a 4th. And guess what I do? Every time I fry chicken in my backyard, I ask Jonathan and Caitlin, do they want a piece? And the reason I do that is because it starts a conversation and building a relationship. And the first thing I found out was that Caitlin wants to have another child, but she's also worried about the women that don't have access to abortion care and actual access to health care. If I didn't talk to them and I just assumed that they were just some conservative voters and that they're probably going to vote for Trump or that they're going to do this or that they're going to do that, that conversation's never had. So my call to action to you is to be a neighbor for the first time in your life. A lot of us ain't been neighbors in a long time. I was raised by my grandparents in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, with Miss Evil next door, with Miss Rudolph next door. I knew their names. They knew me. And if I ever acted up on that street, they'd do something about it before I even got to my grandparents' house. You know what I'm talking about? And we have to get back to that mentality, but from a political space. Because when we build political power, we change the material conditions of our lives. And that's what's at stake here. As I said earlier, we're not in this election voting for how our lives change right now. We're voting right now for how our lives change in the future and what the world looks like 25 years from now, 50 years from now. I want Social Security to be here when I retire, all right? I want to be able to lay my head down and say I did all that I could and let me get my check and salute my mailbox like my granddaddy did, right? And so it's about going out there and being a neighbor. 10 to win is so great, but I need you to be a neighbor, and I need you to be a neighbor after November 5th, because there's an election every year, not every 2 years, not every 4 years, every year, whether it's county commission, whether it's water board, whether it's school board, whether it's county commission at large, whether it's city council at large, whether it's mayor, there is an election every single year. We have to create when we're neighbors, we create a community that is civically engaged. And when we create a community that's civically engaged, we put a white woman, we don't put a white woman in the White House. We put a black woman in the White House for the first time, right? My bad. We put a black woman in the White House for the first time ever, right? That's how, and that's what we're doing right now. And to give credit, because I want to also shout out the state of Georgia, 1/3 of the entire voting population in this state has already voted. 1/3. That is insane to quantify. Latasha knows this. This breaks our brains as organizers. Like, what? It's like, are you serious? But that is the work. And you know where that work comes from? Latasha being on the ground for those 30 years, working in these 15 different states. Me being in organizing since I was 24 at the University of South Alabama as an NAACP president, not getting paid a dime because I was trying to make my favorite, like my students to the left and to the right of me, realize like, hey, the basketball stadium is a voting precinct, and we can all actually choose our city councilman. Hey, if our SGA president wants to run for city council and actually represent us the way that we want so we can have young representation on our city council, we can do that. But we don't do that not being neighbors. We don't do that knocking on the door to the left and to the right of us. That's how we're going to build political power on November 5th and after November 5th.
I'm going to turn it over to Areva, but can I just say, had you passed out more of that chicken, maybe 2/3 would be voting early, okay? I want chicken.
That's right. I'm not ashamed.
Wow, okay, we've heard a lot of information tonight. We got a lot of tips, and we got some homework to do, Georgia. You guys delivered for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in 2020. Georgia, The question for you tonight, are you going to deliver for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in 2024? All right, Georgia, let's go. Thank you to my illustrious panel. Thank you to all of you for coming out tonight. We got work to do. Let's get it done, Georgia.